Oh, these agreements don't work. It's garbage. It's not worth the paper. Yeah, well, if you do one premarital agreement 20 years ago and it was signed 3 days before there's tons of ways to attack it if you don't do it right. Hi, Jeff Marsachi, the Plain English Attorney, and today we're going to talk about a very interesting story that seems to be making its way through the news, and it's really a lot of smaller channels and foreign news outlets that's getting into commentary, but it hasn't really been like a big news story on major outlets, the mainstream press, and it's about a soccer player who's divorcing his wife. He's one of the highest paid soccer players in the world, and apparently he has no assets. They're in his mother's name. And his wife didn't realize this until they actually got to court. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, wow, he planned that right. This was great. Well, okay. No, he kind of dodged a divorce bullet with his assets on this. But at the same time, if this were in the US, this was definitely not the best way to maximize things because there are some potential issues. So let's go ahead and we'll jump into the story first. And then we'll go and move on to what the real better solution would have been to plan things the right way. So, this is Hiba Abouk discovers Achraf Hakimi's mother owns all his assets. Hakimi and Abouk split was rumored for many months before Abouk confirmed it last month. Achraf Hakimi and Hiba Abouk are once again making headlines in the wake of their recently confirmed separation, with the latest reports claiming that Abouk will receive nothing from Hakimi's fortune and assets, as everything is registered under the Moroccan footballer's mother's name. Abouk was requesting half of Hakimi's property and wealth, the Spanish news outlet Marca reported today, stressing that she was shocked to discover that he has nothing to his name. The same source detailed that Hakimi's mother has been receiving his wages on her bank account for a while, adding that she is the beneficiary for him and his wealth. Hakimi and Abouk's split was rumored for many months before Abouk confirmed it last month. The Spanish-Tunisian actress took to Instagram to announce that she and her husband are no longer living together while awaiting divorce proceedings. The reality is that a while ago, after a lot of reflection, the father of my children and I made the decision to end our relationship long before the recent media events that have involved me, which are totally external, Abouk said. All right, so they're getting a divorce. She's an actress, and apparently she's got her own sources of income. He is definitely making a lot of money, but he set things up so that all of his wealth is going to his mother and not to him.
If you think it's important for educational videos like this to get out there, then please help us out by subscribing to the channel.
And so it's set up so that all of his wages go to mom. So he doesn't own it for her to be able to take it in the divorce. This is how he set things up. Now, in the U.S., there are some definite vulnerabilities there. Let's finish out the story, and we'll go ahead and talk about what those actually would be. So, in the wake of rumors surrounding the couple's separation, Hakimi has been embroiled in an alleged R case. We're not going to say that word. YouTube hates it. On March 3rd, French prosecutors announced that they would be investigating the alleged charges against Hakimi after a 24-year-old accused the footballer of her in his house in Paris while his wife and two sons were away on holiday. Responding to the allegations, Hakimi's mother, Saida Mou, said that her son is innocent as he was well brought up. The Moroccan international and PSG right back is one of the most expensive players in Africa. In 2022, the International Center for Sports Studies featured the Moroccan player in its list of the 100 most expensive players in terms of his estimated transfer value. Data published in 2022 by the football focused news website Give Me Sport indicated that the PSG right back is the sixth highest paid African footballer, earning more than 215,000 per week. So that's an awful lot of money. But apparently it's all going to his mother. And there was another article that said that if he would just go to his mother if he wanted something, and she would end up buying it. So one of the things that's going around this, and I'm going to use the better term, the assault case. Again, YouTube and the internet hates that word. It dings the platform, and you can't even talk about it, even though it's in the news. So that apartment in Paris where this incident allegedly happened, they said it was his apartment. It very well may have been in his mom's name. All right, so why is this not a good idea? It's like, okay, he's earning all this money, and now the wife's going and she wants a divorce, and she's going to take half of it from him. I want half. Well, how did he end up protecting himself? It's all going to mom. Now, what are the drawbacks of that type of planning? If you're just putting it in someone else's name, it's theirs. They have absolutely no obligation to give it to you. So what happens if mom gets upset with her son? He has nothing. Sure, from then forward, he can divert his pay somewhere else, but then he's accumulating it, which is making him vulnerable as a target. But everything that he's accumulated and built is gone if mom just decides she's upset with him. What if mom passes on? And I didn't check, I didn't see, but what if he's not an only child? And mom's plan says everything goes equally to the kids. Or if there is no plan, it could go equally to the kids. So now his fortune is being split up among different kids and his siblings. They don't have any obligation to give him his money, quote, back. And it's gone. And what if it ends up one of his siblings has passed on before him and it's going down to nieces and nephews? They don't have any obligation to give it back to him. So that's one piece of it that's bad. But the other is, okay, now it's back in his name, and it becomes potentially vulnerable to these other lawsuits. So, well, in the U.S., all right, if you inherit something, it's separate from divorce, but it's just because it's inherited doesn't mean it's immune from other lawsuits, like that alleged victim. If she's suing him, that money is on the table because it would have gone directly to him. Now let's think about the liability a different way. What if mom gets sued for something? Let's say she's at one of the matches, or she's driving around and she ends up hitting a car containing 2 or 3 other players, and they end up dying and their career's over, and then she gets sued. She's got all of his accumulated wealth that ends up being on the table. So there are all of these different contingencies and vulnerabilities that would make this seemingly, oh, this is great, he's not losing his money in the divorce, but is that really, really protecting it? Now, there is a way to do it, and we're probably going to be talking about this more on the channel and other media outlets that I've got set up, because it's going to be the subject of an upcoming book. So we'll look out for that. So what should you do? Well, there are several things, and we're taking this from the marriage point of view, which also has some potential benefit of lawsuit protection. First thing, in the U.S., there is a domestic asset protection trust. Now, I got to be very clear about this. It's not available in every state, so it has to be set up under a state jurisdiction that allows this particular type of trust. So basically, a domestic asset protection trust is irrevocable. You can put your own assets into it. You can be the beneficiary of the trust. You cannot be the trustee of your own trust. So you can't protect your own trust assets as the trustee. You can't demand money be taken out. You can't control the trustee. Well, okay, who can be the trustee? In a lot of these cases, if not all of them, and right now it's only about 11 states that allow this, it can't be, quote, a relative that isn't going to be impartial, because somehow or another there's just such a close relationship that you're effectively controlling it. So that means spouse, children, parents, and siblings. Now, I say siblings, but the rule in the Internal Revenue Code is that you're not allowed to have them because they're not impartial, that they're just going to do whatever you want. But that is a presumption that can be overcome. And where it is frequently overcome is siblings. And it's like, you think I'm going to do what my sister tells me to do, or you think I'm going to do what my brother tells me to do? Siblings fight all the time. So depending on how it gets set up, yeah, it could be overcome. Is it the safest way to do it? No, that's not the safest way to do it, to stay within the parameters of this type of trust. So the assets go into the trust and you're the beneficiary, but the trustee is not, usually it's not obligated to give you anything. No income, no principal, but they're going to because you're the beneficiary. Now, we can get a little bit more into it. There could be an ascertainable standard just to make sure that you're mandatorily getting your needs taken care of, or it can be totally discretionary. I tend to stay on the discretionary part because, again, if you've got a good trustee who's in place, they will take care of those things for you, potentially even indirectly, rather than just giving you the money. They'll pay for the apartments and the stuff like that. But now we're going to get into some more interesting stuff. The assets can be owned and operated by the trust. So we have the apartment in this place, we've got the residence here in this place, and we've got these other real estate investments, and then okay, we also have other stocks and bonds, and these assets are being put to use in investing, and you're the beneficiary, but again, you're not the trustee. So you've got these assets. Well, are they owned directly by the trust? Well, it could be. But we can get into some very interesting things now where if it's owned inside a limited liability company or a corporation, and look, for all of this, you need to make sure there's an accountant who can understand and put this together to make sure the taxes are getting paid the right way. And the fact is, this is a highly protective type of strategy. You may be paying more in taxes, but again, is it paying those extra taxes going to be better than losing half of it in a divorce or all of it in a lawsuit? That becomes the question. So if you have that apartment in this place, if you have your primary residence, if you have a vacation home, and it's inside an LLC, and now you are actually leasing it from the LLC. All right, and we're going to talk about how the soccer player could have used this to his advantage too. The assets are owned and operated by the trust, but potentially wrapped inside that corporate structure. In marriage, premarital agreement And now there's a lot of people yelling and screaming out there, particularly with stories on in YouTube and on the internet these days. Oh, these agreements don't work. It's garbage. It's not worth the paper. Yeah, well, if you do one premarital agreement 20 years ago and it was signed 3 days before there's tons of ways to attack it if you don't do it right. There are a lot of deaths that happen in hospitals because of staph infections, but we're not talking about eliminating hospitals. We're talking about making sure that the hospitals handle things correctly and get things sterilized the right way. So you don't throw the whole thing out. Same thing with premarital agreements. You've got to make sure it's done properly, well ahead of the wedding, and the terms and conditions are reasonable and solid, and that you act in accordance with it. So, if you have and this was a story from Canada about a year and a half, 2 years ago, about he never actually married this woman, and she's trying to claim common law marriage or something similar to it under Canadian law, and she won, and it's like, oh, they never got married. Well, okay, she lived with him most of the time. He gave her an engagement and a wedding ring and referred to her as his wife. Okay, it's not garbage. You were completely and totally acting as if that was your spouse. And just because you didn't have the piece of paper later doesn't excuse it. With a premarital agreement, you have to enforce it and go according to the terms of it. And one of those big terms is that both parties will continue to work and provide income. And income could be evenly going in towards expenses or in proportion to their earnings or some other type of formula, and you have to enforce it. If it's, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of all the expenses this month, and then it happens next month, and then the month after, it's, okay, now there's a track record of you not paying into the other person, not paying into it and paying those expenses, and okay, that's how these agreements get tossed. So if it was set up so that these assets were in this trust, here are the expenses that go in, and the rest of it you can do whatever you want. That's where each month or each quarter you take all of the excess and move it into your domestic asset protection trust. So now it becomes covered, protected assets, and the trustee can invest it. But what else? Always make sure that you're living and residing in a jurisdiction that doesn't try to get around all these premarital agreements, because that's one of the root things, is that premarital agreement that's listing here's exactly how things are going to go. You don't want to be in a jurisdiction that just routinely throws them out no matter what. Thing is, if it's done properly, there are very few jurisdictions that just say, oh, forget it, we're not going to deal with it. There's jurisdictions where you can, and you comply with whatever the residency requirements are to be in that jurisdiction most of the year, to be a resident and come under that state laws. What else do you have to do? All right. This is now getting into something that's just a little bit more clever. We're just going to give you a taste because this may be, it's definitely going to be a subject in the upcoming book, and it may be the subject of future videos. What if that primary residence has a lease agreement? So now the LLC that's owned by your domestic asset protection trust is leasing the property back to you and your spouse. And you've agreed, we're going, in that premarital agreement, we're going to pay the rent equally. Well, now you've gotten half of that, of your money, getting filtered back into your asset protection trust. But you also have the half from your spouse. So your spouse is actually paying in, and that money's going into your trust. Okay, so you not only are you protecting your money, you're actually funneling some of your spouse's money through the fact that you're renting this property and you've agreed to pay some expenses in. So that's probably a much better way, and it eliminates those issues of, oh, I just put everything in my mom's name. Well, if mom dies, if mom gets sued, if mom gets ticked off. What if your trustee gets ticked off and decides they don't want to give you anything? Well, typically there's a clause to remove them, because at that point they're not looking out for your best interest, and another trustee can be put into place. This is often why, in a lot of cases, depending on the level of the wealth that's accumulated, it might be good to have a trust company just handle it for you. So, like I said, you got to look out for tax implications, because there's probably going to be more taxes if you set this up in as complex but compliant a way as possible to provide you all of this protection, not just from divorce, but from lawsuits. There are probably going to be some more additional taxes, but it's going to be pretty solid if you do it right. So I hope you found that information useful and entertaining. And as I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.